Hey, welcome back to Living in Minnesota. I am really excited about this video in particular because my channel is all about helping people moving to the Twin Cities, but somehow I've never made a video on exactly what that process looks like. So I'm going to break it down into 7 very simple steps for you of what that process looks like, and then I'll teach you everything you need to know about those 7 steps. All right, let's get right into it. And I will put these 7 steps in chapter links down below, so if you want to scoot ahead to something that you're most interested in, totally fine, don't worry about that. Also, while you're looking down below on this video, you're going to see in the descriptions all my contact info. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I honestly love getting calls. It makes my day if I get a text from somebody or a DM on Instagram that, has a question from a viewer on YouTube. So don't hesitate, reach out anytime, and you'll find my link tree to literally everything. You can download our buyer's guide and all kinds of information in the description down below. All right, let's kick it off with number 1 is going to be deciding where to live. Now, this is my personal, most fun part of it that I enjoy the most, and this is going to be helping clients figure out where to live. Now, I have a specific video that I'm going to mention now, and I'll throw the link up here for you, that is all the different things that I can't say or questions I can't answer. And I'm not going to go into it now, but that'll be a teaser. You can go find that video afterwards. I can't tell you where you should live. It's kind of an equal housing no-no for me to steer people to this area and away from this area. But here's what I can tell you. There's a lot of great resources on my channel, so you can go find an entire playlist that'll have a bunch of neighborhood tours that'll break down all the different major cities around the Twin Cities, in Minneapolis, in St. Paul, and in the surrounding metro area. So you can go there, start with that. Start with figuring out, where do you want to live, what kind of cities do you like, and what's important to you. The next thing you're going to want to do is figure out what your priorities are specifically. So, for example, some clients I have moving here, shout out to Mike and Nadia, they just moved from Washington, D.C., and they wanted to be in an area where, she felt was going to be really inclusive. They have dogs, they're dog parents, and so they want to be close to dog parks and vet clinics. That's what was important to them. I've got some other clients moving here, shout out Chris and Laura coming from California. They have a couple of small kids, and they wanted to make sure that they're in a really good school district and somewhere that they felt safe, right? So they can look up those crime maps. But whatever your priorities are, you want to just figure out what's important to you, what you want to be in proximity to. Sometimes that'll be family, sometimes that's work, sometimes that's a commute, sometimes that's getting to the airport, sometimes it's public transport, sometimes it's parks and nature centers. There's literally a ton of different things. But just make a list with you if you've got a partner or a spouse and decide what's most important. Then third with that is you're going to want to figure out how far of a drive you're willing to go. So I've had clients moving here and they've said within an hour radius of grandma's house, and that's great. Other people have been like walking distance to mom and pop restaurants, okay? It doesn't matter, but whatever you figure out that will help me. So then you can come back, you can email me, say, hey Joe, I need some recommendations. We want to be close to dog parks and nature trails, and we want to be within 30 minutes of our church over in this city. And then I can put together a few recommendations based on your budget where you might enjoy living. Speaking of budget, that's going to be number 2. So let's talk about how do we figure out your budget. The main tip I like to give when discussing budget is you've got to start with the payment, not the purchase price. And so you're going to go to a website, find a mortgage calculator. The one I always talk about is mortgagecalculator.org. You can go there and you can just start playing with some numbers. All right, if you buy a $500,000 house and you do a 5% down payment, and then you can use about 1% for your property taxes, and then maybe $1,200 to $1,500 for your homeowner's insurance. It'll ask you all of these things on there. Don't worry. You can plug all those numbers in, and then it'll spit out a payment for you. Then you can look at it and go, ooh, nope, I don't think we're comfortable with that based on what we're making. And so then you can work backwards. All right, so if we bring that purchase price down, or if we increase our down payment, or maybe we buy down our interest rate or something like that, and then you can play with those numbers. I've had people that go both ways. They throw in $500,000 and they're like, oh, this will be the max. Then they see the payment, they're like, oh, that's no big deal. Let's go to $700,000. Or the opposite. They're thinking they're looking at $400,000, but all of a sudden they put their numbers in. They're like, man, we're not comfortable any more than $300,000, right? Whatever the budget is, it doesn't matter. We've got options around the Twin Cities that are in great areas, great school districts that you're going to be comfortable and really enjoy living in. But we've got to start with that budget, your priorities, and your proximity, and then that will determine where you should live. So step number 3, once you've figured out your budget, let's talk about getting pre-approved. Now, there's really 2 main things people ask, and that's going to be, when do I get pre-approved, and who do I get pre-approved with? So first of all, When do you get pre-approved? You can't necessarily get pre-approved too early, because really that's just filling out the loan application with the lender so that they can pull your credit, they can look at your income, they can look through your tax records and different things to make sure that you're going to be good to go when that time comes. Typically that pre-approved letter is going to be good for 90 days. So if you are within 90 days of when you're hoping to get a property under contract, that's even better. But you can do it. I've had people get pre-approved like 6 months or 12 months in advance, just so that they make sure that there's no surprises, or if they have credit work they need to get done, that lender can work with them to help get their credit improved or work on any documentation that they need to get, so that when they're ready down the road, then they'll be ready then. You're going to want to make sure you get your pre-approval first before you go put your house on the market, or before you give your landlord 60 days notice on your current lease, okay? So now let's talk about who do you get pre-approved with. And let me kind of explain it in a story form. So when you come to me and we're helping you buy a home, let's say we go see a bunch of houses and we find that perfect one, you want to make an offer on the home. I'll put together the whole packet. It's about 30 pages, and the top document is going to be your pre-approval letter. So then when I go to that listing agent and I say, hey, I got Jan and Jane, and they want to make this offer, and let me tell you about the offer. The first thing that listing agent is going to say is, great. Who's the lender? Have we worked with them before? Do we know they're going to do a great job? Are they good at communication? Who's the company? Is the pre-approval solid? They need to be reassured that whoever you've gotten your pre-approval with is going to get the job done on time without any hassles. That's not going to create any risk or hassle for their sellers. So let's work backwards from there. What's that going to mean for you? It's going to mean if you go to some online company that you saw on a website that promise to have great rates, that's not going to give the sellers much assurance that the transaction is going to close. And even for your sake, you would hate to have a lender that's just a pain in the butt to work with. They may not know what they're doing. They may not be very good at it. They might have missed something on your pre-approval. I've had transactions, I kid you not, where we got a property under contract. We got all the way to like a week before closing. The deal fell apart because the lender missed something. You don't want that to happen. They don't want that to happen on the list side. So you're going to need to go with either someone who you've worked with in the past, or a friend or family or somebody has worked with, preferably multiple times, that we know they're going to do a great job, or it needs to be somebody that I recommend. I don't get compensated by anybody, and I don't even care that much if you use my people, except for that I know how it's going to affect you. Number 4, moving right along, let's talk about showings from out of state. Now, when you're handling showings, this can be the thing that usually gets buyers most worried when they're going from one state to another, right? Joe, how do we see that house, but we're not there, but we have to see the house in person? Well, can we get an inspection? What's this whole process? Let me break it down for you really, really simply. And that's going to be, I've seen a whole range of clients and what they're comfortable with, okay? So let's talk on the one extreme. That's going to be this client who can't buy the home in a new area without like living there first, getting to know the area, knowing really well that they're going to love the city that they're in. That's great. So for that client, I would recommend that you come and you get probably about a 6-month lease. Now, I would not do longer because you don't want to just throw money away for no reason, and you don't want to be stuck in an area that you don't like. So if you don't like the area, great, switch to a different city and you can find a different rental if you needed to. Or best case, I would say, is get an Airbnb for 1 to maybe 3 weeks. If you can do a week to week, that's great. But typically, I think it's actually a lot easier for people once they actually get here. The plane lands, they've got a rental car, they're driving around the city. Once they get to know the area, they can usually feel a lot more comfortable a lot more quickly than they would think. So people think they need a year lease. You don't. I would strongly encourage between a 6-month to a 1-week lease. If you're in that category and you need to get to know the areas first, you've never been to the Twin Cities or something, that's a great way to get to know the areas. Then on the other extreme, let's talk about the people that don't need to see the city. Maybe you've been here before, you know all about it, and you're just coming back home. That's one option. Or for people that are getting relocated for work, maybe. Whatever it is, I've definitely had a lot of clients that they don't care. They don't need to come here. They don't need to get to know the area. They already know it, or they're comfortable enough just making the move. So then for those clients, they may never actually even come into town to see the home until we get under contract. You can send me a list. I'll make a list of ones I recommend based on your priorities and the proximity that we talked about. But once we have that list, I'll put it together. I'll go see those homes and we'll just do a virtual showing, right? I'll walk around with my phone and we can do it on Zoom. We can do it on FaceTime. We can do it on Google Meets. We can do it on whatever works for you. But that way we can get you through the properties to see them virtually. As we're going around, you can be like, oh, hey, Joe, wait, stop. What's over there? Wait, how does this layout work? And I can help break that down for you. Then there's everybody else that's in between. And so that's going to be the majority of people doing showings. What I tell most people is that if you can come fly into town over a weekend, maybe a long weekend. Maybe this is with both spouses if you're married, or even if it's just one if you got kids back home. If one of you can come to town, then typically spend 2 or 3 days. What that will look like is on your first day out, I will make you kind of a tour guide plan. I will send you out on your own. Here's a restaurant you can try in this city. Here's the schools over here you can drive through. Here's some different neighborhoods that fit your price range and what you're looking for. And I can just send you kind of exploratory. Here's a few suburbs even. Maybe you just go from east side, west side, south side, north side, and we get you familiar touristing the city. Then we'll go out together, typically on a Saturday, and I'll make a whole list of properties that we're going to go see. Typically, I'm just going to make this for you based on what you've told me you like. But if the client has specific properties that they've been seeing on my MLS search, then we'll get them into those for sure. Step number 5, let's talk about the logistics of your move. So we've done the showings, we found a property, and we've now gotten it under contract. And now it's going to be the time to set up those movers. So here's a few options very quickly. On one end, I've got clients that want to do everything themselves. They'll find a big U-Haul, they'll rent it, pack it, and then move it here. That's a great option. A couple things you should be aware of is you're going to be completely responsible for the contents of that moving truck. So if you didn't pack something very well, it shifts and a bunch of stuff breaks, that's going to be totally on you. It's the least expensive option to do, but it's obviously more of a pain in the butt. You got to do all the work yourself. So it depends if that's most important to you. On the other extreme, we've got the people that want to do nothing themselves, and it is an option so you know that you can pay a moving company. They will come in, they will pack up your house for you, they'll take your dishes out of your cupboard and put it into boxes and put it in the truck. They'll then drive to the new house, everything's labeled, and then they will unpack and unload everything into your house. Now, if you're doing that full service, it's going to be tens of thousands. I mean, 20,000, I wouldn't be surprised for a larger family doing a full concierge type of package. So super convenient, very easy, but just something to be aware of. I will say if you're doing that option, cheapest is not always the best. I've heard many horror stories of people who, they didn't read the fine print, and then apparently if something breaks in transit, they don't take responsibility and it's still on you as if you did the U-Haul, right? There's been also other options where they will pull up and drop it off, but they're not going to actually put anything into your house. You have to unload it. There's also been other things where, they don't guarantee a date. So you would think you would just have them pick up on this date and drop off on this date a couple days later when the trucker moved across the country, right? That's not always the case. Sometimes they'll come pick you up, then they'll go pick up a few more jobs. If there's got partial load or something, then they'll move it to the new city and they'll go hit a few cities along the way. So it can take like 2 weeks to get your property there. So you don't want to do that. Just be aware you don't necessarily want the cheapest company. And just to redefine print, make sure you understand what you're getting and if that's what you're looking for. Then let's talk about the people in between. So if you are going to get a short-term rental like we talked about before, and you're not going to move right into your new place immediately, what do you do if you're in limbo? There's a few different options. Mainly, I would say people will typically get a U-Haul for all the essentials that they need right away in that rental. If you're getting an Airbnb, for example, it's usually furnished, so it's really nice. You'll pay a little more, but then you don't need any of your furniture, for example, in that rental. You might just need your bedding and your clothing or whatever you want to keep with you. That you would pack up into a U-Haul, and then you would get a pod for the rest of it. Now, what a pod is, if you're not familiar, is basically like they get a big shipping container, they bring it to your current house, your old house, drop it off on your driveway. You then get to load that with whatever you decide is non-essential that you won't need in that rental. You can usually have a few days or a week to load that pod. They will then take it, transport it to your new city, and then they'll put it into a storage unit there in the new city. If you are doing a pod, just make sure that they do deliver to the new city because not all of them will go across state lines or will only go a certain distance. Okay, now that you've gotten those logistics figured out, let's talk about number 6, which is the underwriting process. So the underwriting process is basically a fancy way to say, how do we get from the time you get your offer accepted to the time we close? That's primarily going to relate to financed buyers if you're buying a home with a mortgage. That's going to be the bank doing their due diligence to make sure that they're comfortable with you as a borrower, that they feel you're qualified for the loan before they actually write the check and pay for that house. So the only thing you really know from the underwriting process, and I'll go into it a lot more details in one of my other videos if you want to see more about that underwriting process. But the name of the game is you just need to keep the lender happy. Don't be surprised when they ask you for all kinds of random stuff and you get a new request for this and a new needed updated bank statements, you need new tax records, you need to know what this big deposit is in your bank account. They will ask you for all kinds of stuff. It's the most hassle of the entire process, I would say. Most buyers are just kind of annoyed by the time they get done with it. Unfortunately, it's with any bank, it's with any lender that can just kind of get under your skin a little bit. So just take a deep breath, know that it's coming, know that your only thing you need to do is keep getting the bank what they need when they need it, and then that will get us smoothly to closing. Number 7, let's land the plane with the closing process. So this one's usually pretty quick and easy actually, but the way we work with closings is if you're still out of state at the time your closing is going to happen, you'll just want to fly in typically at least a couple of days beforehand. We don't want any hiccups. We don't want your flight to get delayed because of bad weather or something. So make sure you are planning to arrive a couple of days before your closing. And then I also recommend that you stay a couple of days after. If you can stay a week after, that's great. But typically, if your closing's on Friday, maybe you can stay till Monday or Tuesday. The reason we do that is just in case something gets delayed. It really doesn't happen terribly often, but because you're an out-of-state buyer, you're just going to make sure you have that flexibility. If you can get a plane ticket that's got you the flexibility that you can change without a big cost, that would be ideal as well, depending on your airline. But just make sure that you're here a day or two early and then you're here a day or two afterwards in case there's a delay. So what's the closing itself look like? Everyone who's on the purchase needs to be in person. Right now, for buyers, we really don't have a way to do it remote. I don't really know why, to be honest, but pretty much no title company I've seen is doing these virtually yet. So you will need to be here in person. Just bring your photo ID and anything the bank requested. And then we will sit down at a conference room table with myself, with the buyers, and with our closer. They will walk you through everything that you're signing to make sure that you're comfortable with it. You can request those documents a few days in advance, but most people honestly just enjoy having it explained to them instead of having a whole stack of papers that they've got to actually read through. Only my attorney clients like to read through that, and we can definitely get those docs for you in advance. So there you have it. That's the process of moving from one state to another. If you're headed towards Minnesota, I'd love to help. Make sure to find all my contact info down below and go check out the channel next, where you can find all kinds of Twin Cities neighborhood tours.